Hey there, I'm Doug Boynton. You've locked on to WHRO's Weekly Edition, where we round up the local stories that matter, or at least the ones that didn't get buried under cat videos and celebrity gossip. Here's what's cooking this week. The Virginia Beach City Council decided it's time to put money into health screenings for firefighters, because catching cancer early sounds like a good plan. Our Democracy in Action series is back with a deep dive into how the Hampton City Clerk handles meetings and tallies votes. Trust me, it's more interesting than you might think.
I don't come to work and push paper all day. I do things that impact the lives, the well-being, the happiness of people in this community.
And Hampton Roads hospitals are keeping a close eye on their IV fluid supplies. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Virginia Beach City Council gave the thumbs up last week to fund more medical screenings for firefighters. This comes just over a month after the fire department lost another one of their own to cancer. WHRO's Sienna Morales covered the story.
Firefighter Matt Galena died of esophageal cancer in August. He was 48. Speaking to the City Council, Fire Chief Kenneth Pravitz talked about Galena's funeral.
What if we could have done something different? What if we could have prevented us being at that event? We have the power and the opportunity to make some positive change for our firefighters.
Pravitz says enhanced screenings for cancer and heart disease can help to detect illnesses at earlier, more treatable stages, saving lives and saving treatment costs. Council approved up to $620,000 for the enhanced screenings. Sienna Morales, WHRO News.
The state gave the green light to a new public health program brought to you by a team of Old Dominion and Norfolk State universities. WHRO's Ryan Murphy is on the case with the details.
The State Council of Higher Education of Virginia has given the go-ahead to the new Joint School of Public Health. The partnership between ODU, which now includes Eastern Virginia Medical School, and historically black NSU will offer bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in public health. The move makes Norfolk State the second HBCU in the nation with a public health school. Officials say the joint program will focus on examining health equity in the region and helping to address disparities with public health initiatives. Courses will be offered at all three campuses. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Community leaders got together at Norfolk State University to talk about environmental justice with the folks from the EPA. Because, well, clean air and water aren't exactly optional. WHRO's Catherine Hafner covered the story.
Environmental justice means giving everyone equal access to clean air and water. Leslie Gillespie-Marthaler with the agency says that has to include helping right historical wrongs that disproportionately harmed communities of color.
Not just put a Band-Aid on it, but trying to go back and really understand how do we make these communities stronger.
Kim Sutterth was one of the activists at the table this week, representing Norfolk's South Side. She says it feels like leaders are finally listening.
It's usually those of us who are on the end of environmental injustice having these conversations, trying to convince decision makers to participate. This was the opposite, where it was the decision makers reaching out.
The group will meet again soon to discuss specific actions. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
And now for something completely different. It's a story about the people who keep our democracy from falling apart, literally. The Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO is shining a light on everyday heroes who make things work, whether they're doing it through their jobs, activism, or just plain grit. This week, WHRO's Nick McNamara gave us a look into the life of Hampton City Clerk Catherine Glass. She's been calming the masses, running public meetings, and counting votes like a pro for the last 20 years.
Good evening and welcome. We'll begin by asking our clerk call the roll, please.
Councilman Bowen.
Present.
Councilman Brown.
I don't come to work and push paper all day. I do things that impact the lives, the well-being, the happiness of people in this community. And that's a really cool way to spend the day. It's a really cool way to spend the day. My name is Catherine Glass, and I'm a lifelong resident of Hampton and proud to be Hampton City Clerk. What a clerk does, and it varies by size of locality, it very much varies. If you work for a relatively small town, you may do everything from issuing dog licenses to making sure that that if their trash pickup got missed, you're the person they call to get it rescheduled. In a city the size of Hampton or larger, I'm kind of like a teacher because I give the council homework. I'm kind of like the middle person that facilitates the flow of information. Everything that goes to those 7 people, their phone calls, their email, the legislative agenda, all of their supporting materials that they need to read to be knowledgeable about what they're going to vote on. I'm the organizer of that information to make sure they get it, have the time to review it, have the resources they need, and then on the other side, I'm the one who tells the world what they did.
Item 38, 24-0200, rezoning application by the City of Hampton to rezone into the Hampton River 4 zone of the short-term rental overlay, OSTR district. All of the parcels of land bounded as shown in the attached proposed rezoning map. Item 39 is 24-0201, rezoning application by the City of Hampton to rezone into the Hampton River 5 zone of the short-term rental overlay, OSTR district. All of the parcels of land bounded as shown in the attached proposed rezoning map.
My path to government service was totally random and unintended. When I was in my early 20s, I lived in a neighborhood here in Hampton, and there was a big money developer that wanted to develop some wetlands into condominiums. And my father invited some neighbors over to talk about it, about why we didn't think it was a good idea. All of us came to City Hall, and we had one person speak, and the rest of us just stood up in support. And the Planning Commission recommended against the development. We went on to City Council, did the same thing, and the same thing happened. And that land is still marshland today. It's not developed. I think that kind of set the stage, even though I didn't realize it. And a vacancy came up on the Planning Commission. So I served on the Planning Commission and 2 times as chair over an 8-year period. Not too terribly long after that, there was a vacancy in the clerk's office. And my husband actually came home at dinner and said, "You ought to apply for this job." And I'm like, why in the world would I want to leave the law firm that I've worked for 20 years to go work at City Hall? And he said, because you like to fix things and you understand local government. I rode around with the job application in my car for 2 weeks until the very last day. And I said, what the heck? It can't hurt to throw my hat in the ring. So I came in for the interview, and every question they asked, I just innately knew the answer to. And I walked in the door here in March of 2005. There's a powerful feeling in knowing that you're at the right place, doing the right thing. I can help demystify local government. It's a scary thing to somebody who doesn't know about it. One of my favorite things is turning around a disgruntled citizen. You don't get anywhere when you're angry and all ramped up about something. You have to get to the level where we can talk about what really is the problem and how can I help you solve it? Or if I can't help you solve it, can I help you explain why things are the way they are? You're not going to go wrong if you're doing good stuff. You might make some messes. It might take you a while to get to the end. But if you're always motivated by doing good, it's always going to come out just fine.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, we've got some not-so-great news about a few ships with faulty welding jobs and a heads-up for Virginia's colleges and universities. Jewish community and civic leaders came together in Virginia Beach on Monday to remember the October 7th attack on Israel by Hamas. It was a somber gathering to reflect and pay respects. WHRO's Sienna Morales was there.
2 Israeli students volunteering in the U.S. attended the commemoration in Virginia Beach. Here's Emily.
You split your life into two parts, before October 7th and after it.
And here's Daniela.
After October 7th, you appreciate every moment in your life because life can change.
And here's both of them.
We pray for all the hostages come back home.
Amen.
Amen. As soon as possible.
Am Yisrael Chai.
Around 100 people remain hostages of Hamas, according to the Associated Press. In Palestine, the subsequent war has killed more than 41,000 people and displaced around 1.9 million. Sienna Morales, WHRO News.
The Virginia Military Survivors and Dependents Education Program, a ticket to nearly free college for injured vets and their families, faced big cuts earlier this year. But after some serious pushback, lawmakers decided, oops, we're bad. Now they've got to figure out how to keep the program afloat with rising costs looming. Radio IQ's Brad Kuttner in Richmond reported the story.
About $90 million was thrown at the program in the short term to cover more than 8,000 VEMSDEP beneficiaries this year, but the state's nonpartisan watchdog, the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, or JLARC, offered a few long-term solutions. Among options is adding a good academic standing requirement or applying VEMSDEP waiver funds only after federal benefits have been exhausted. But both options would only have a small impact on the total costs. Bigger changes could include not covering graduate-level degrees as the program does now, setting a standard coverage rate instead of covering full costs, or increasing disability requirements. These options would have a larger impact on the program's costs. And JLARC's final option increases the existing residency requirement from 5 to 15 years. This would lead to the most dramatic cost savings. Senator Bryce Reeves is himself a veteran but doesn't qualify for VEMSDEP, and while he's open to finding some ways to wrangle costs, he also doesn't want to renege on promises the state's already made.
We do need to look at those costs, but we can look at resident requirements and some of those things. I don't know that anything's off the table, but I also know that we have to hold true to the promises that we made to these folks.
Legislators have from now until January to draft legislation that will need to be voted on and approved by Governor Glenn Youngkin. In Richmond, I'm Brad Kuttner.
Last week, we learned that 3 Navy ships were discovered built with bad welding jobs. This week, the Navy named those 3 ships from Newport News Shipbuilding. Not exactly what you want to hear about vessels built to weather the high seas. Nick McNamara reported the story.
Navy Secretary Carlos Del Toro says the ships involved are the aircraft carrier George Washington, currently at sea, and submarines Rickover and New Jersey, both under construction at Newport News Shipbuilding. In a letter to the House Armed Services Committee, Del Toro says the Navy is exploring legal options over the suspected faulty welds, adding that the matter has been referred to the Department of Justice. While the faulty welds don't affect ship safety or operations, 23 additional ships are now under review. The Navy aims to complete the evaluation by mid-October. Huntington Ingalls says it followed protocol and notified the Navy as soon as the issue was found. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
More than 6,000 National Guardsmen were called in to help out in North Carolina and nearby states after Hurricane Helene left a trail of destruction across the southeast. The storm took more than 200 lives and turned roads and bridges into rubble. So a lot of the relief work is happening by helicopter. Jay Price from the American Homefront Project hitched a ride with one of the crews.
This is how the day starts at the National Guard Aviation Facility in Salisbury, North Carolina. Huge fork trucks move among rows of choppers. They load in FEMA pallets of bottled water and emergency meals as air crews from 9 state National Guards get their missions.
I think we're looking kind of the Spruce Pine, Burnsville, North Carolina area.
Chief Warrant Officer Nathaniel Ernst is the pilot of call sign Guard Chopper 6279. Like the rest of the 4-man crew, he's a part-time soldier called into full-time duty for the disaster.
Flying around there yesterday and just could see the devastation and the need. So we'll probably go up there and find a location to drop off the food and water.
That was the initial plan anyway. It lasted a few minutes. Instead of Spruce Pine, the crew is redirected in the air to a place 45 miles away, the tiny mountain community of Creston, North Carolina. Ernst sets us down in a field near a community center, and quickly a group of the locals form a line to unload food and water. One woman makes a point to hug as many crew members as she can. The National Guard soldiers have been getting a lot of hugs. We make a short hop to tiny Ashe County Airport, which usually doesn't have a lot of action, but is clogged with small civilian aircraft bringing supplies from all over the country. Pilots like Todd Eby from Goshen, Indiana.
We brought 1,500 pounds down and we're going to go get another load.
Eby says he was watching the vice presidential debate and thinking about the disaster, and suddenly the nation's partisan divide didn't seem that important.
And I thought, you know what, we could do something.
Local volunteers, like retiree Jim Liska, load the goods into pickup trucks. Liska's home is fine, but
there's some areas I've seen that it's devastating. And I've got a couple friends, I haven't heard from them since this began. So, fingers crossed.
Back at the helicopter, the crew seats 2 members of the 80-person FEMA search and rescue team working in Ashe County. One is Zach Smith.
We are going to follow the North Fork of the New River doing an aerial reconnaissance looking for significantly damaged structures, where we can then send targeted search teams on the ground to comb through those areas.
Minutes later, we fly just above the trees over the river. Below unscrolls a random tragedy. Many homes look completely fine, but others were entirely swept away, leaving just a house-shaped spot on the grass. The shallow stream is tame again, but littered with parts of roofs and walls. Sheets of crumpled roofing tin wrap around trees. A Volkswagen Beetle is stranded on a sandbar. We drop off the FEMA crew at the airport, deliver more supplies, and make an unscheduled stop when the crew sees a family burning a huge pile of debris on a riverbank. We land to check on them. Bobby Lovejoy's house was high enough to escape damage, not so all his neighbors.
We saw houses floating down. This guy had a little cabin right over here. It flipped up and rolled down, and storage sheds, all kinds of stuff. It was crazy.
Lovejoy says they have enough food and water, so 6279 lifts off and heads back to Salisbury. We get there at dark, and Ernst climbs out of the cockpit, pulls off his helmet, and thinks about the chaos of his workday. 11 takeoffs, 11 landings.
You know you've got to keep going because everyone else is struggling right now. And so you put in the hours to do it. You get a mission, you figure out what needs to happen to get that mission done, and you do it.
And he said tomorrow they'll get up and do it again, along with dozens of other National Guard, active duty, and civilian helicopter crews. This is Jay Price reporting.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
Hospitals around Hampton Roads are closely monitoring their IV fluid supplies after Hurricane Helene messed up a major U.S. supplier's plant in North Carolina because, having enough IV fluids on hand is important. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson has more.
60% of the country's IV fluids come from Baxter International in western North Carolina. Damage from Hurricane Helene shut down the company's manufacturing site. It's not clear when production will be able to restart. In Virginia, Riverside Health says they are proactively managing IV fluid supply to make sure there is no disruption to care. That means patients may receive different fluids when clinically appropriate. Chesapeake Regional is conserving IV fluids when possible and working with its supply chain department until regular suppliers are available again. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
Shout out to our media partners at Virginia Public Media in Richmond for contributing to this story. The Virginia Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, acronym JLARC, has flagged some state colleges and universities for possible trouble down the road. WHRO's Connor Worley has the scoop.
While no state-supported college or university is in immediate financial danger, the JLARC report says 7 of them should be monitored closely and 3 have some viability risk because of declining enrollment and other factors. The 7, Christopher Newport University, Longwood University, Norfolk State University, Radford University, the University of Mary Washington, the University of Virginia's College at Wise, and Virginia State University. The main driver is the nation's falling birth rate, with the number of Americans turning 18 expected to decline until at least the 20 to 40s. Connor Worley, WHRO News.
Millions of Virginians are gearing up to hit the polls this fall, but before you can make your voice heard, there's that little matter of registering to vote. Radio IQ's Brad Kuttner went behind the scenes to find out what really happens in the registration process.
Voter registration is the process by which citizens register with their state to be eligible to vote. In Virginia, there are numerous ways to do so. Here's Stephanie Isles, Norfolk City Registrar.
They can register to vote in person at the registrar's office. All of our public libraries have applications. They can fill one out and send it in. Disability service agencies such as Social Security and Disability Service Offices, DMV, they can register there. We have online voter registration through the Department of Motor Vehicles that links to the statewide system, or the voter can go online to the Department of Elections website and register to vote online.
And who's eligible? you must be 18 by the date of the next election, you must be a U.S. citizen, and you need to have residence in the locality where you intend to vote, though there are rules for the homeless allowing them to list an actual physical dwelling place. And who's ineligible? Virginia won't let felons vote unless their rights have been restored by the governor. Those adjudicated mentally incompetent without having legal capacity restored are also forbidden to vote. In order to register online, you need to have a state ID. Data from that ID, including your signature on that card, is used to confirm your identity. For those who need to update their registration or register for the first time, Isles suggests the online method.
You're not missing anything when you do it online because you have to answer those questions to get through the application.
No matter how you register, your application goes to your local registrar's office, who then has to input your application. The registrar then checks for completeness. That includes the voter's name, age, address, phone, and social security number, and signature. That data is run through the Department of Motor Vehicles database to see if the information matches someone who's already registered. Any false statements made, such as citizenship or felony status, on a registration document gets flagged by the registrar and sent to the local Commonwealth's attorney, where you could be subject to criminal prosecution. The Conservative Heritage Foundation tracks election fraud convictions by state. According to their records, there have been about 6 criminal convictions for false registration in the last 17 years. According to the Virginia Department of Elections, there were about 6.1 million registered voters in the state as of the 2023 general election. Cleanup of the voter rolls, removing those who've died, moved, or shouldn't have signed up in the first place, happens regularly, with data from the State Bureau of Vital Statistics, data sharing agreements with other states, national change of address reports, and surrender reports from the DMV feeding info for clearing rolls. Isles said about 85% of new voter registrations she sees come in through the DMV, but advocacy groups also hold events to register voters. Among those is Ted Braggs. He's a retired Chesterfield resident and the voter registration chairman for one of the Richmond chapters of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. He's been active in the election space on and off for about 50 years.
I just get so frustrated as I just go out and talk to people and hear people talk about voting doesn't matter. It's not going to make a change, and I disagree with that. So that's just my way of giving back.
His current work has him hosting voter registration events out in the community, most recently at Gilman Court in Richmond's North Side. He's gone through the state-mandated training and certification process every year for the last 5 years, making sure he knows how to collect, turn in, and handle the sensitive data of would-be voters. But even as he carries on the long history of going into the community to register voters, he said his fraternity has started pushing folks to register online.
I take a notebook tablet out in the field with me that allows me to access that website and if someone wants to do it online rather than fill out a form.
Voters can register on Election Day and vote. However, they'll cast a provisional ballot which must be validated by the local electoral board before it is counted. In Richmond, I'm Brad Kuttner.
All of that said, are you registered to vote? Do you have a plan on how, when, and where you'll be voting? Tick-tock. You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. Big thanks to everyone who helped make this show happen today. Sienna Morales, Steve Walsh, Catherine Hafner, Ryan Murphy, Nick McNamara, and Michelle Hankerson. Also shout out to Jay Price from the American Homefront Project, Brad Kuttner from Radio IQ, and as always, Connor Worley, who produced today's program. Don't forget, you can always catch the full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed. And for your daily dose of news, check out WHRO.org, the WHRO smartphone app, or the WHRO Reports podcast. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Thanks for listening. Stay safe. Be well.